My name is Juniper Hale, 32 years old. I told my son his 6th birthday would be special. Not in the Pinterest sense, not in the hire a pony sense. Special like being seen. He's the kind of kid who draws robots with 3 arms and insists dinosaurs can return if we believe hard enough. We'd planned stars on blue balloons, a cake with a frosting smudged rocket, and a present he'd circled in a catalog until the page thinned. Then my parents called and said, "Let us host. We've got it all. Decorations, food, even a magician." They said it like a peace offering I'd be ungrateful to refuse. I hesitated, then agreed. I'd been raised to believe accepting help is how you keep the room from catching fire. 2 weeks before this, my brother Jake had asked for $15,000. His businesses come and go like wardrobes in a teenage phase. Crypto, lawn care, sneaker flips, each needing one more little boost, each collapsing into a shrug. I said no. Calmly. I told him my savings were for my son, that I was done being a safety net stretched to thin air. He called me selfish, said I owed him, reminded me he'd once stood up for me to Dad as if that were a mortgage accruing interest. I blocked his number for a day, unblocked it the next, and told myself I wasn't keeping score. We drove to my parents' that Saturday with my son buckled into his starry shirt, a handmade card for Grandpa, sealed with a sticker he'd pressed on crooked. As we turned down their street, I watched for balloons on the mailbox, heard for music, children's voices, something. The house was still. No streamers in the windows, no folding table on the lawn, no shoes by the door. Just my father at the kitchen table with a beer, my mother scrolling a tablet, and Jake leaning in the doorway wearing a smirk like a bruise. My son stopped beside me, toes bouncing, eyes bright. "Where is everyone?" he whispered. I crouched, smoothed a cowlick. "Maybe inside," I said, and my voice didn't break. I asked my father where the cake was. He didn't look up. "We don't waste money on kids who aren't special," he said, like he was reading weather. I waited for the punchline. There wasn't one. Jake laughed once, sharp, pleased. "He doesn't deserve one anyway," he added, and glanced at me to see if the dagger landed. My son walked forward with the card, practiced "thank you" already on his lips. My father took it without looking and placed it beside his glass, an unread receipt. My mother rose, opened a cabinet, and returned with a gift wrapped in yesterday's news. Inside, a toy car missing a wheel and a half-used coloring book with 2 pages already scrawled. Crayons shaved down to stubs. My son's face crumpled, then smoothed by force. "Thank you," he said softly, and held the broken car like it could choose to be whole if he was polite enough. There are moments that detonate. This one burned cold. The clock above the stove ticked too loudly. A neighbor's mower buzzed far away. I looked at the table I'd fed with my paychecks, the electricity in my name, the internet I'd maintained because the plan was in my account. The groceries I'd stretched on weeks my mother's hours were cut. I saw the broken toy in my son's hand and realized this wasn't forgetfulness. It was a choice. I gathered our things without a speech. I wasn't going to perform for an audience that had already decided its review. Jake muttered, oversensitive, at my back. His wife cut me a pity glance and went back to her phone like she had an alibi. My mother asked if I was really doing this, as if handing a child a half-used book was a misunderstanding we could laugh about later. My father lifted his beer and stared past us into nothing, as if we were weather too. Outside, the winter sun made everything look honest. In the car, my son kept the toy car in his lap. "Can we get a cupcake on the way home?" he asked. "A real one?" "We can get 12, I said, and felt something click in my chest like a latch. We bought cupcakes with uneven frosting and wrote his name in blue sugar. We played dinosaur documentaries too loud and sang off key. He fell asleep on the couch with a smear of frosting on his cheek and the new toy I'd hidden in my coat trunk tucked against his ribs. The broken car sat on the counter, wheel missing like a metaphor that refused subtlety. When the apartment was finally quiet, I opened my laptop in the safe in my closet. A folder waited, documents my lawyer and I had been assembling for months. I'd given my parents and Jake small shares in my consulting company years ago, a guilt gift I labeled gratitude, a way to keep the family peace by letting them say they helped. In practice, it meant personal withdrawals without notice, client dinners charged to the corporate card, and a constant undertow of insinuation. Family keeps family safe, and safety is measured in dollars. I stared at the paperwork, at the clean serif type, at the structure that could hold a decision without me apologizing for it. I wasn't angry, not in the wildfire way. I was done. There's a difference you can feel in your bones. My phone buzzed. Noah, my boyfriend, texted from an airport gate 3 time zones away. How'd it go? I typed. We left. It was bad. He was brave and sent a photo of our sleeping son with a frosting comet on his cheek. I'm sorry, Noah wrote. Back tomorrow. I'll cook something he can't stop talking about. You good? I will be, I answered. 3 dots blinked, disappeared, returned. Proud of you, Ed. Another notification. My mother had posted a filtered photo of a candle with the caption, Family First. Beneath it, a heart from Marissa, the woman Noah used to date, still orbiting our social maps like space junk. I watched the heart pulse for a moment and set the phone face down. I wasn't going to fight a war in a comment section. I locked the apartment door, checked the chain, and poured hot water over tea leaves like ritual. At the table, I listed what needed to be severed: shared accounts, joint tabs, dormant emergency cards. My father had insisted be available just in case. I circled shareholders meeting and underlined access revocation. I wrote Jake, no, in block letters so large it cut through the page. When the kettle clicked, I thought of the last 2 weeks, the ask for $15,000, the insult, the way cruelty had been rationed into my son's hands and expected to taste like cake. I thought of all the times I confused appeasement with love, contribution with belonging. I thought of the broken wheel. I tucked the legal folder back into the safe and left it open, like a fire extinguisher in plain sight. Tomorrow, I would stop being a bank with feelings. Tomorrow, I would stop treating my signature like a family heirloom to be borrowed when convenient. Tomorrow, I would choose severance over sentiment. In the bedroom, my son turned and murmured. Dinosaurs can come back, he said in his sleep, small and certain, if we believe. Maybe, I whispered, sitting on the floor beside his bed, but we don't need them to. We've got tomorrow. The apartment settled, pipes sighing like tired lungs. Outside, someone laughed on the sidewalk. A car door thumped closed. Winter pressed its face to the glass and fogged it with a slow breath. I put the broken car into a drawer, not to keep, but to remind. Some things are designed to roll forever. Some are proof you were right to walk away. When my phone rang again, I didn't check. I knew, with the grim precision of a storm forecast, that in 48 hours Jake would call and ask for $20,000, that he'd talk in bullet points, 3 months behind, landlord threatening, wife on the verge of leaving, throwing numbers like darts, hoping one stuck. I knew I would let silence answer first, then paper. I turned off the last lamp. Darkness felt like ownership finally. And just before sleep took me, I pictured a conference table, a vote, a clean signature on a line that said mine and meant it. 48 hours later, my phone lit up while I was making dinosaur-shaped pancakes that came out looking like geography. Jake's name filled the screen like a warning label. I let it ring once, twice, and answered on the third as if I'd been interrupted mid-thought, not mid-boundary. I need $20,000, he said without hello. His voice had that quickened rhythm of someone rehearsed. For rent, 3 months. The landlord's done playing nice. We have until Friday. I pinched the bridge of my nose and watched the batter bubble into continence. What happened to the lawn care, the truck Dad co-signed for? Folded, repossessed, he snapped. Don't make this about the past. I'm standing in the present. I need help. What about Mom and Dad? They can't, he said, too fast. Pension's locked up. Mom doesn't want to get involved. The last line skirted something he didn't want me picking up and set it down in front of me anyway. Not involved was never the same as not benefiting. My son tugged my sleeve. Can I make a comment? He asked, already sprinkling sugar like stardust. I handed him the spoon and walked into my office, let the door hush shut, and stared at the safe. Jake, I said, calm as a hand on still water. Hold on. I put the phone on his desk, didn't mute it, and opened the safe. The folder was there, binding combs, tabs like vertebrae, the spine of a new life. The plan had been born on nights when I watched credit card notifications roll in for dinners I hadn't eaten, and tabs at a club where my father performed old power for men who owed him nothing. I'd guilt-granted shares in my firm years ago, trying to purchase peace with equity. In return, they built nothing and claimed everything. I told myself they protected me by being involved. The ledger told a different story. I returned the phone to my ear. Silence travels quickly when someone's used to controlling it. "Are you there?" Jake demanded. "I'll call you back," I said, and hung up. I texted my lawyer. "It's time. Emergency meeting today. 2 p.m. Can you host?" His reply arrived before the text bubble finished pulsing. "Boardroom reserved. I'll file the notices. We'll do this clean." Noah texted from a cab. "Landing at 10. Can I swing by?" I sent him our address and a mental warning. Today would be a guillotine lowered slowly and exactly. He responded with a thumbs up and a knife and fork emoji. It shouldn't have made me smile. It did. By noon, I'd arranged childcare and called an emergency shareholders meeting. According to the bylaws I wrote when I still thought family and firm was a braid you could wear without choking. We took the elevator to the 10th floor, me, my lawyer, my operations lead, and a recorder who typed in cool, unflappable strokes. Through glass, the skyline looked like a lie you could live on. Inside, the conference table held a pitcher of water and a plate of shortbread no one touched. When my parents arrived, late, together, my mother smelled like a department store sampler and nerves. My father carried his old certainty, like a briefcase he'd forgotten was empty. Jake slid in last, hoodie up, eyes bloodshot, the posture of a man preparing to perform a misunderstanding. "I have a rent situation," he began, tugging the hoodie strings like they might ring for service. "This is a shareholders meeting," my lawyer said pleasantly. "We'll address agenda items first." I kept my voice even. Over the last 4 years, the company has experienced repeated misuse of corporate resources by non-operational shareholders. We've documented personal withdrawals, charges unrelated to business, and interference with client relations. There have been no contributions of labor, no fulfillment of any defined role, and multiple breaches of the shareholder agreement. Jake scoffed. "Breaches? Family dinners with clients are relationship building." My operations lead slid a packet across the table, highlighted line items, steak dinners after canceled meetings, club tabs, airline points attached to an account that wasn't mine. My mother's eyes flicked down the list and back to me. "You don't have to humiliate us," she said softly. "We can adjust." "Adjustments," my lawyer said, "are for mistakes. This is a pattern." He clicked a remote, and the screen displayed a timeline that made my stomach tighten despite having built it. Charge after charge, quarter after quarter, a drain disguised as support. My father tried for thunder. "You gave us these shares. Are you rescinding your gratitude now that you're successful?" "I'm rescinding access you used to make me less successful," I said. "I gave you something to honor how you raised me. You converted it into leverage." He leaned back, smile thin. "And you think you can remove us with a show?" "I think we can vote," I said, "and record that vote." The motion read like a scalpel. For cause. Revocation of shares held by non-operational parties for repeated misuse and failure to perform. It required a majority the three of them no longer controlled. My operations lead voted aye. My counsel, proxy for silent investors who wanted deliverables, voted aye. I voted last. The recorder's keys chirped softly, as if birds were agreeing. "Motion passes," my lawyer said. "Effective immediately. Access is terminated. Cards will decline in," he checked his watch, "about 60 seconds. Jake laughed, a bright, false sound. "You can't do this." "You did this," I said. "I'm documenting it." My phone buzzed on cue. Club tab closed. Another. Joint family account frozen. I sent the client letter I'd drafted at 2 a.m. the night of the ruined birthday, a refocus notice, a reaffirmation of our work, and a quiet promise that distractions had been removed. It wasn't vengeance, it was hygiene. The meeting dissolved with the slow rustle of people leaving rooms they don't own. My mother paused at the door. "You humiliated us," she said again. But there was something else under it now. Fear, the animal kind, the kind that smells a trap sprung and realizes it wasn't set by enemies but by gravity. "It was humiliating to watch my son be handed a broken toy car," I said. "This is math." She flinched and left. My father texted one word a minute later. Really? I stared at it until it became a dot in a snowstorm and then disappeared. Outside, the afternoon had the sour light of a day that won't decide what it wants to be. Noah met me on the sidewalk, scarf crooked, hair wine-tossed, warmth like a room I could walk into. He didn't ask if I was okay. He asked, "Where do you want to go next?" "Home," I said. "Then the bank. Then I need to send one more email." We ate late lunch at my kitchen table, Noah making grilled cheese like a quiet confession, my son insisting on cutting the sandwiches into rocket fins. While they negotiated over the crispest triangles, I froze the last joint account they had been draining under the label "For Emergencies." I changed a corporate password I'd been avoiding, not because it was hard, but because it meant closing the last door they could slip through and pretend they were invited. By early evening, the messages came, as scripted. Jake left a voicemail composed of vowels and fury. I let it sit. My father sent a second text with a photo of his club card cut in half on a napkin, captioned "Petty." My mother called 4 times. I picked up on the 5th. She did not ask about her grandson. She didn't ask why. She asked, "How could you humiliate the family like this?" "I protected my son," I said, "and my work. I won't apologize for cutting off hands that only ever reached to take." She went quiet. I could hear the hum of their fridge, the background noise of a house I had kept alive and walked out of. "We were going to help," she said finally. "With his birthday, something came up." "It always does," I said, "when I say no." After I hung up, the doorbell rang 3 times in a row. Fast, aggressive, the rhythm of a dare. I didn't need the peephole. I saw the shape of Jake's anger through the wood. Noah stepped forward and looked at me for permission. I shook my head and opened the door enough to make a point. He shouldered past me like he still owned the space, the way he has always entered rooms, on assumption. My son looked up from the rug, Lego pieces scattered like shrapnel, smile reflexive and soft. "Hi, Uncle Jake." Jake didn't glance at him. He planted himself in the center of the room like a problem demanding an audience. "You think I'm going to lose everything and just walk away quietly?" he said, voice low, shaking. "I have nothing. No rent, no credit, no shot." I kept my body between him and my son. "You've had 1,000 shots. I spent years loading the gun and handing it back. You refused to aim. You did this," he hissed. "You and your—" He jerked his chin at Noah like a weapon. "Perfect little life." Noah didn't rise. He leaned against the counter, unthreatening and immovable. I took one step closer to Jake. "2 days ago, you let a 6-year-old be humiliated in a house I've been funding for years. You stood there and laughed. Today, you lost access to the money you siphoned. You want to tell me who did what to whom." His jaw clenched so hard I thought a tooth might crack. "You'll regret this," he said. The words were a family heirloom, polished, hollow, handed down. I opened the door. "Leave," I said, "now. Or I call the police and file for a restraining order. Choose which story you want in the record." He backed out, slammed the door so hard a frame fell. My son flinched. Noah caught the frame mid-fall and set it on the table like he'd planned to move it anyway. When the house stilled, I went to my office and opened my rarely used business inbox. 3 emails were flagged urgent. One made my face go hot. A former client forwarded a proposal from Jake Hale Consulting, offering my services at a discount. The deck was a sloppy copy-paste of mine. Same phrasing, same colors, my strategy points with his name stapled on top. The return address was a UPS mailbox in another city. I forwarded everything to my lawyer and wrote one more email to Jake. Subject: final notice. The body was a list. Every unauthorized contact, every copied deck, every login from an IP I knew he had used in my office before he lost access. I ended it plainly. Any further contact with my clients or me will trigger formal legal action. If you ever contact my son, I will not hesitate. I pressed send. Outside, a neighbor laughed too loudly. A siren moaned and faded. My son placed 2 Lego fins on a misshapen rocket and announced it would still fly. Noah washed the 2 pans we'd used, noisily, like punctuation. He dried his hands, came to the doorway, and asked, "What's next?" "Bank," I said. "Then a call I've been putting off." And because storms have a way of acknowledging themselves, my phone rang at 6:02 a.m. the next morning while I was tying my son's shoes. "Dad," not flat, not performative, panicked. "Did you do something to the accounts?" he asked. "Everything is frozen. Checking, the trust, even the rental account. The bank called at 6. They said there's an investigation. Fix it." I looked at my son, who was practicing knot loops like magic, and then at the safe, and then at the calendar, where I had once written birthdays and investor meetings that now felt like different planets. "I didn't do this," I said, "but I know why it's happening." His breath rasped. "We need you." He was right. He needed me, and I was done being necessary. "Let me call you back," I said, and hung up. The line sounded like a door closing. The house felt lighter. The call from my father still echoed when I opened my email. Overnight, the forensic accountant I'd hired months earlier had sent a detailed report, pages of transfers, highlighted arrows, signatures that weren't mine, but leaned against my name like shadows. Buried in years of filings, my family had created a secondary LLC, piggybacking off a licensing agreement I signed in my 20s. They'd funneled money through it quietly, rent checks, credit padding, even vacation tabs disguised as business development. The red flag came when Jake tried to wire $25,000 to an offshore crypto wallet. The bank froze everything, every account tied to the Hale family name. My father hadn't called because of guilt. He'd called because the free faucet was sealed shut. Noah read over my shoulder, his brow a hard line. "They built a trap out of your own signature," he murmured. I nodded, and then they tripped it themselves. By midday, I'd sent the report to my lawyer and confirmed with the IRS that the case file was already open. It wasn't revenge, it was truth. A truth they'd written in ink and receipts long before I decided to look. That evening, Jake tried again. Not with pleas this time, with theft. A former client forwarded me a proposal from Hale Strategies, a poor imitation of my own decks. Same fonts, same bullet points, even the same color palette, stripped of polish. The email came from a UPS mailbox dressed up as an office suite. I wrote one line back, subject line, "Final notice. We have documented every infraction, every forged contact, every login attempt. Any further use of my name, my clients, or my son's likeness will result in formal legal action without warning." I hit send, the click like a gavel. That night, Noah paced our small kitchen, his voice low but sharp. "Marissa knew," he said finally. His ex's name landed like a shard. "She admitted she gave Paige advice on how to spin the birthday story. She said she was just helping a friend tell her truth." He shook his head. "She thought siding with them would keep her relevant. I told her she's done, completely." I studied him, wary but grateful. So she was their PR coach. "Not anymore," he said firmly. "She's blocked. She doesn't get to stand near this." I wanted to believe him. Trust, for me, was a bridge being rebuilt plank by plank, not a tower restored overnight. But his consistency, his quiet presence, was already a kind of architecture. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. This time, the message was from Jake's wife, someone who'd stayed mostly silent through the chaos. Her text was short. "I found something. You need to see it." I didn't respond right away. My instinct said trap. But then another message arrived, a photo of a thick yellowed folder, corners bent, my company's name scrawled across the top, misspelled but recognizable. Beneath it, a document bearing my forged signature. I called her. She answered instantly, voice urgent but not rehearsed. "He left in a rush," she said. "Took one backpack. I started cleaning. This was shoved behind tax files in the hall closet. Contracts, receipts, drafts. I can't explain all of it, but it looks wrong. Please come. You should see for yourself." I left my son with our neighbor and drove across town. The rental house sagged at the edges, curtains drawn tight. She opened the door with eyes that looked older than the years she'd lived. No pleasantries. She handed me the folder and gestured to the couch. Inside were years of paper. Email drafts where Jake called himself co-founder of my firm. A pitch deck copied slide for slide from a conference talk I gave in heels that blistered my feet. A mock logo, my brand with his name beneath mine. And then something worse, a half-finished employment contract. The listed hire, my son, age 6, the signature line blank. The room tilted. My hands shook against the paper. "He tried to use my child," I whispered. She nodded, eyes down. "I think he opened an account too. In your son's name. I found statements. At one point it had over $40,000. Now it has 12. I snapped photos, logged each page, slid the originals back into the folder. My lawyer would need them whole. Evidence, not relics. Why are you showing me this now? I asked. She swallowed hard. Because I'm done covering. I have a daughter to think about, and he's not coming back. I left with the folder under my arm, its weight heavier than any suitcase. The sky was low, colorless, a ceiling pressing down. In the car, I texted my lawyer. Emergency filing tonight. Fraud, forgery, identity theft, minor exploitation. His reply came within minutes. Bring everything. We'll move fast. Driving home, I realized I wasn't shaking from fear anymore. I was shaking from clarity. They had crossed the last line they could. When I walked into my apartment, my son was on the floor with his Legos, piecing together a crooked spaceship. He looked up, smiled, and said, "It can still fly, even if it's missing a piece." I knelt, kissed his head, and whispered, "So can we." The folder sat heavy on my lawyer's desk, papers fanned out like a crime scene. He wore gloves while cataloging them, as if the smudged signatures could bite. Each page told the same story. Jake wasn't just reckless, he was deliberate. The fake co-founder titles, the plagiarized pitch decks, the forged contracts. But it was the documents with my son's name that made my lawyer's jaw harden. "This isn't just fraud," he said. "It's identity theft of a minor. That escalates everything." Hearing those words out loud made me grip the arms of my chair until my fingers hurt. My son was 6. He still thought dinosaurs might come back if we believed hard enough, and Jake had tried to weaponize him on paper. I remembered the birthday, that broken toy car, and it hit me like a second betrayal. They hadn't just humiliated him, they'd commodified him. We filed quickly. Forgery, fraud, wire crime, identity theft. My lawyer notified the bank and the IRS. The folder was scanned, logged, and sealed as evidence. He looked me in the eye before sliding it away. "This will move forward," he said, "but we need to shore up your defenses." That night, I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of forms and a pen that felt heavier than steel. I revoked every financial power of attorney my parents had once held. I had my name removed from the family trust, every joint account, every vehicle or property tie. Then I tackled what hurt most to realize I'd left undone: guardianship. If something happened to me, custody of my son would have gone to my parents, Jake next in line. The thought made my stomach flip, so I changed it. Effective immediately, his emergency guardian would be my best friend, the one person who'd never asked me for money, who'd shown up at hospitals with coffee instead of invoices. When I told her, she cried, said she'd be honored, and promised she'd keep pancakes stocked for Saturday mornings. I also rewrote my business succession plan. If I was gone, she'd run it until a trusted board stepped in. My son's inheritance was separated, secured, ring-fenced with legal steel. No one with my bloodline but him could touch it. Noah came over late, shoulders tight from a long day. He found me buried in paperwork, red eyes, half-empty mug. He didn't say, "You should rest." He sat, read over my shoulder, and placed his hand lightly on my wrist. "I know you don't need rescuing," he said, "but you don't have to guard the walls alone." I let the silence between us speak. He'd cut ties with Marisa completely. I'd seen the blocked screen. His presence wasn't a fix. It was ballast. The next morning, my lawyer called with another update. My parents had contacted an attorney about grandparent visitation rights. I almost dropped the phone. The same people who told my son he wasn't special, who gave him half-used crayons on his birthday, now wanted legal access to his life. "They have no case," my lawyer reassured me. "No caregiving history, no consistent visits. And with this documentation, any judge will see through it." Still, the attempt stung deeper than I expected. Love wasn't what they wanted. Access was. A new channel to keep me tethered. We filed a motion to block any future attempt. Preemptive, ironclad. That night, I tucked my son into bed, spaceship Lego perched on the nightstand. He asked, "Do I get 2 birthdays next year?" I laughed softly, smoothed his hair. "Maybe 3. He grinned and drifted off, clutching the blanket like a shield. I sat on the porch after, the city lights distant and blurred. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail later. Jake's voice, cracked and desperate. I'm sorry, I messed up. Please don't do this. I deleted it. He sounded small for the first time in his life. But remorse isn't the same as repair, and I wasn't going to mistake one for the other again. The walls were closing in on him, not me. For once, I was outside of them, breathing air that wasn't borrowed. The news broke on a gray Friday morning. My phone buzzed with a headline alert before my coffee even finished brewing. Local man arrested in multi-state fraud probe. The mugshot was Jake's. Same jaw clenched, same eyes darting for someone else to blame. The article listed charges like a grocery receipt: identity theft, forgery, wire fraud. It mentioned a seized laptop, frozen accounts, and a child savings account opened illegally. My son's name was redacted, but I knew. I pressed the screen off and exhaled until my chest stopped shaking. A few minutes later, Jake's wife texted again. Thank you. My daughter slept through the night for the first time in months. I stared at the message, then slid my phone face down on the counter. Gratitude was hers to give, but closure was mine to keep. My parents tried one last ploy the following week. A letter, handwritten in my mother's script, appeared in my mailbox. 2 pages of barbed sweetness. We still love you. We're considering filing for visitation. Family is forever. I didn't open the door. It tried to pry. My lawyer wasn't surprised. They have no standing, she said, filing a preemptive motion with a thick stack of exhibits, birthday photos, neglect records, pawn slips, police reports. Still, reading the word love in her hand felt like stepping barefoot onto broken glass. I set the letter in the shredder. Meanwhile, my business needed a symbolic cutting too. I dropped the Hale surname from the brand, hired a designer to rebuild the logo, and announced the restructure with a quiet strength in new typeface. No flourish, no drama, just mine again, unshadowed. Clients responded with relief. We always knew where the value came from, one wrote. I printed that line and pinned it above my desk. To celebrate, I took my son to the lake cabin I hadn't visited since I was a child. The place smelled of pine and memory. We skipped rocks, drank cocoa too sweet, and he fell asleep by the fire with his Lego spaceship clutched in one hand. I sat on the porch with a blanket around my shoulders, staring at the water's black glass. For the first time, peace didn't feel like an intermission. It felt permanent. On Monday, Noah joined us. He cooked pancakes until the cabin filled with syrup and laughter. He didn't make speeches about the future, didn't try to fix what was already fixed. He just sat at the table, listened to my son explain how dinosaurs could come back if we believed hard enough, and passed the syrup without being asked. Consistency is louder than promises. A week later, the final envelope came. Court confirmation of my filings. Every joint tie severed. Guardianship secured. Successor plan notarized. My son's inheritance untouchable. It was over, not with a bang, but with paperwork, with signatures that meant freedom. I kept one thing from the past, the broken toy car, missing its wheel. I set it on my desk as a reminder, not of humiliation, but of the line I refused to let them cross again. The last call I didn't answer came from an unfamiliar number. The voicemail was my mother's voice. We still love you. I deleted it, because love without respect isn't love. Love that humiliates a child isn't love. Love that only flows when there's money attached is not love. That night, my son asked if he could have 2 birthdays next year. I kissed his hair and said, maybe 3. He laughed, frosting from a cupcake smudged on his cheek, and I realized the answer was yes, not because of calendars or cakes, but because every day from now on could be one we claimed as our own. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty for closing the door. I felt free.